Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all courtesy is observed. I'd like to thank the organizers of the World Ocean Summit for the opportunity of addressing you, and indeed I offer warm greetings to all those to whom I'm addressing these remarks today. My remarks will focus on marine pollution, particularly the chemical and plastic pollution that we so flagrantly dump into the ocean every day. I use the word dump because whether we do so intentionally or not, the ocean is the end recipient of the detritus that we pour into our city drains and rivers and groundwaters and wetlands and the atmosphere. But before I do that, I'd like to say a few words about the state of the ocean. Many of you know my daily mantra of there can be no healthy planet without a healthy ocean, and the ocean's health is currently measurably in decline. If we turn to global authorities, we see clear evidence of the ocean's decline, be it by way of ocean acidification, ocean warming, deoxygenation, rising sea levels, death of coral reefs, decline of marine biodiversity, destruction of seagrass meadows and mangrove forests, various indices of pollution, overfishing, and the continuation of massive subsidies to industrial fishing fleets responsible for overfishing and even illegal fishing. For the love of all that we hold dear, this decline cannot be the inheritance we bequeath to our grandchildren. Intergenerational justice demands a stop to the decline, a great conservation of remaining biodiversity, and a restoring of natural ecosystems wherever and however we can. The Secretary General of the United Nations has issued a red alert for humanity. He says we've been waging a war against nature and that it's time to make peace before it's too late. To make peace, rapid transformational actions applying already identified effective solutions are urgently required. Principal amongst these is stopping our use of fossil fuels. Here we start to grumble. But if we love our grandchildren, hard choices must be faced. Radical changes in consumption and production must be made. And in all walks of life, taking action to embed sustainability into the ruling of our ways so that when our accounts are squared, we find ourselves on the right side of history. As an aside, some of you may wonder why we must attend so many of these international conferences in order to address the international issues confronting us. The question of our carbon footprints arises, and who hasn't suffered from conference burnout? But the key fact is that these conferences and the negotiations leading to and from them are the most effective means we have at our disposal to arrive at the international agreements we require. If the multilateral conferences leading to the Montreal Protocol of 1987 had not been held, the horrible consequences would now be upon us of a planetary ozone layer heavily depleted by our mass production of chlorofluorocarbons. At their best, these conferences are vectors of international consensus. And just as we did with the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework, again in Montreal at the end of last year, we must use every minute of these gatherings to advance a universal response to the great 21st century challenges presented by the climate crisis and biodiversity loss, planetary pollution, and the decline of the ocean's health. Ladies and gentlemen, my emblem, my inspiration, my logo, call it what you like, is a creature so small that you cannot see it. You probably didn't learn about it at school. I certainly didn't. Funny that, because it is the very base of the food chain and is possibly the most plentiful genus on this planet. Its name is a Prochlorococcus, and it is the tiniest photosynthetic organism we know of. Before you dismiss Prochlorococcus from your mind, I wish to add that without this little critter continuing to live a healthy life in the ocean, you probably would not exist, for Prochlorococcus produces some 20% of the oxygen in our biosphere. No healthy planet without a healthy ocean. The ocean contains over 80% of life on this planet, and our interaction with that life demands respectfulness and an understanding of the connectivity of all things. When a person washes cosmetics containing plastic microbeads from their body, or a smoker nonchalantly tosses aside a cigarette butt with its microfiber-laden filter, those microplastics make their way inexorably down drains and rivers to the sea. There they're imbibed by sea creatures, some of which are then caught by fishing fleets and returned with their microplastics to the dinner plates, in some cases, of those responsible for this intrusion of the natural order. In the name of utility and efficiency and cost-effectiveness, we've unleashed a plastic plague upon this planet. It is a plague so invasive that most of us now carry nanoplastics within us. They can cross the blood-brain barrier and the placental barrier. They carry within them endocrine disruptors, and chemical pollutants, and toxins and bacteria. Yet we're told that medical research on the effect of the imbibing of microplastics by humans and other creatures is inconclusive at this stage, even if there's informed concern that the unrelenting buildup of the microplastics does not bode well for the future. Meanwhile, we've all seen the pictures of the rivers choked with plastic, the plastic tides, and the remote beaches littered with plastic that has crossed the ocean before making landfall. Many of these plastics break up in the sea and are fatally consumed by whales and turtles and seabirds and other marine creatures. And yet we're expected to believe that the utility of plastic outweighs the damage it is doing to us and our planet. I do not believe that. I'm old enough to remember a world with no plastic, and it was, in my view, a better world. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2022, Economist Impact and the Nippon Foundation published The Invisible Wave, their seminal report on how to get zero chemical pollution of the ocean. If you don't have a copy, I recommend that you download one and use it as your go-to backgrounder on this subject. When I first read it last year, I put the following entries into my diary. Chemical pollution of the ocean deserves to be treated with the same gravity and urgency as plastic pollution. Chemical pollution is largely unseen and is thus more difficult to track than plastic. From the Invisible Wave report, I derived the following list of polluting chemicals that are making their way into the ocean. Synthetic chemicals, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, lead, persistent organic pollutants, so-called POPs, flame retardants, pesticides, chemicals embedded in plastics, pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, radioactive materials and radioactive waste, oil and oil byproducts, household products, added to which are excess nutrients, fertilizers, and sewage. A diary note reads, chemicals have become essential to the maintenance of our modern way of living, but they're poisoning us. My diary also notes this extract from a UNEP news release at the time of the UN Environment Assembly in February a year ago in Nairobi. Quote, along with putting an end to plastic pollution, a second key resolution supports the establishment of a comprehensive and ambitious science policy panel on the sound management of chemicals and waste and preventing pollution. The ministerial declaration recognizes humanity's failure to date to manage chemicals and waste. End of quote. I'm pleased to report that the work of that panel is now underway. Ladies and gentlemen, it was at the same UN Environmental Assembly in Nairobi a year ago that we made the decision to establish an intergovernmental negotiating committee to agree upon a legally binding global treaty to end the plastic pollution crisis. The committee's hard at work, and if it proves to be a vector of international consensus, we have every right to expect a robust, workable plastic treaty to be ready for adoption by the end of next year. The international agenda is crowded, but who can rightly say that plastic and chemical pollution and the better governance thereof should not have prominent places at the international conference tables around which we gather? Without any doubt, they will be high on the work program of the third UN Ocean Conference to be held in Nice in June 2025. But before that, there are many pertinent gatherings, and I single out the UN Water Summit in New York next month, where the Source to Sea ethos and its principles for controlling chemical and plastic pollution will be addressed. I think also of this year's G7 summit in Japan and the G20 summit in India as occasions for these leading economies to recognize the need for meaningful solutions to chemical and plastic pollution. I also call on the World Economic Forum to give prominence to these life-altering issues at its next annual meeting in Davos. The matters I've raised in my remarks today are not concerns that should be left solely to negotiations between bureaucrats, scientists, and the industries most directly concerned, the chemical industry and the plastic industry, big pharma and big oil. They are issues that may be having life-changing effects on you, your children, and grandchildren. Thus, I put it to you as consumers and citizens that you should recognize your part in all this. Make yourself better aware of what's at stake and make your choices accordingly. Keeping the public eye upon the scourge of plastic pollution and the poisons of chemical pollution will serve to raise ambition at the negotiations underway to control them, and will hopefully prevent them from being swept under a polystyrene carpet. I thank you for your attention today.